If you were to make a game with a controllable main character, then your game development begins with the main character. How he moves, how he controls, what he does, and how he looks. I've gone through 3 iterations of character design before I landed on what I am satisfied with. The process of that will be the talking point today. Designing, modeling, animating, and programming everything to kick the main character into gear. This here is the second iteration out of 3. The problem with the first character design is that it does not have enough character in the design. Not enough interesting details, not enough asymmetry. This fella feels like a grunt instead of the main character. That is what I aimed to fix with details like the mask and the feathers. I need the main character to seem less like a cog in the machine and more like his own man, but with obligations. Another problem was that I aimed at something like Warcraft 3 too much. I had good reasons for it. For a game where you need to shoot hundreds of enemies, it is not a bad idea to have their models be very simple and their silhouettes wide and chunky. Maybe I will go back to that direction. As of now, I couldn't nail the style in such a way that would leave me satisfied, so I move away from it. This time I built a rough form estimate out of 6-sided shapes. The first guy had too narrow of a chest. It didn't look right. It does now. After the blockout is in place, I start shaping a more detailed mesh. First iteration had 900 trees. This one will land in a ballpark of 1600 trees. It is almost double the detail, but for a main character in a video game, 2000 trees is still pretty damn low poly. This time around I choose not to connect the arms to the body altogether. I need the chest armor piece to not deform at all, and the character's right arm, the pistol hand, will be made out of separate meshes anyway. Early PS1 games did something like this due to limitations. In this case, it's more of a design choice. I really won't win much from the shoulder joint deformations here. So to hell with them! Taking extra care with the boots once more. Shut up, it's important. As I work on these flaps, or whatever they're called, I reminisce about Fable 3's Industrial Revolution look. I find it unexpectedly difficult to get the correct shapes of things. Make them too clean, too straight, too unchanged. Then there is no reason to have subdivisions here at all. Make the shapes too crooked. They look like a misshapen mess. Is it just me, or does his chest appear to be too short compared to the legs? Must have been my imagination. Nothing special about the armature. And I jump into weight painting again, dancing between fixing the automatic mistakes and making my own. Bending points at elbows and knees again. It's as if I forget how to do them every time. Wild. Waistline deformations here are particularly egregious. I need the character to turn the chest 90 degrees to the right or to the left, but it looks rough. If I had more geometry, more edge loops, it would have not been an issue. It's because I'm trying to avoid armor deformations and this skeleton doesn't have that many bones, it deforms like hell. Sometimes in order for the deformations to look proper, you have to make unintuitive decisions. For example, in order to prevent the boot flap from clipping into the leg, I attach the top vertices to the upper foot bone, even though it makes no sense logically. In my experience, low poly modeling is full of such tricks. I follow a certain rule of thumb for checking leg segment lengths. Your shin will always be shorter than the hip bone. The further the limb bone is from the origin of this limb, the shorter the bone becomes. If you squat down, the heel of your foot must dig into your butt cheek, around the point where your hip socket is, more or less. If the character's foot extends beyond the butt, the shin is too long. If it doesn't reach the butt, the shin is too short. Following these rules is, of course, a design choice, an artistic decision. It's not necessary per se. However, if you are working with humanoids and sticking to at least a somewhat realistic proportions, it's good to keep these rules in mind. Time to remodel the pistol hand, starting with the pauldron. It will all be a bit more detailed, more form-fitting. I'm paying more attention to the insides. Like a complete moron, because who will ever look at those? My idea behind the pistol hand is that it is not a prosthetic. No Sekiro situation today, fellas. Sorry. It is an exoskeleton armor piece that a designated gunman wears on his shooting arm, so it simultaneously acts for defense and as a mechanical contraption to help with the recoil and stuff. Now, it may be silly to think about this stuff so early in the development cycle, let alone do this for a low poly aesthetic, but what can I say? This is the character design process. If I'm not putting these considerations in, nobody is. Adding this rail thingy to the pistol hand to sell the exoskeleton look even more. I model the skirt as a separate mesh. This way I may swap it for another later, without having to redo the entire model. I add feathers to the character's head to give the design that little oomph, that little personality boost. I also had thoughts about giving him these sort of night vision goggles, which would go up and down to his eyes, but I have scrapped this idea. What else? Oh, the mask. Ooh, I give him this small metal visor mask, which does quite a lot to differentiate him from the previous design. When the modeling process is over, for now, it is time for UV unwrapping. From the first iteration, I more or less know how to distribute my islands, my seams, symmetries, which projections to use and where. Some things I do differently. For the trousers and an armored part of the chest, I use view projections, which I then straighten up. View projections can give good results when you know which side of the mesh is dominant and needs to have the least amount of stretching. For the arm, I'm gonna use a cylinder projection. It usually is the best choice for tube-shaped objects, as long as you can get at least one straight seam. When I say tube-shaped, it can mean both torso and limbs. Doing UV unwrap by hand is always about space. You want all of the parts to be in the same detail ballpark. People who know what they are talking about call it texel density, the pixel per unit ratio of each polygon on the UV map. I do break the rule a bit, because my textures are blurred. You won't notice the difference in details unless I mess up the scale too much. With the blender's help, I'll check which areas are too stretched and even them out. Dark blue is good, and the further the color is from dark blue, the worse the stretching is. Moving on to texturing. Setting up my materials beforehand and keeping in mind to bring saturation up. To override my color curse, I latch onto this frayed, burnt at the edge texture from the first iteration and spend too much time detailing this look. It's a goddamn artist trap. I enjoy working on it, so I do not notice how stupidly, criminally long time it takes. I refine the faded coffee look of my metals, remembering that it must look utilitarian, like brass. It must feel bent, used, dirty, but not out of the dumpster dirty. More like as good as can be in the woods dirty. Now I can apply this material to other metal elements, like the mask. It's all coming together nicely. Textures now contrast and shine, but even though I'm using simple brushes, it goes so slow. Once again, and I cannot emphasize this enough, I wish I didn't put so much effort into detailing, when instead I should have finalized the overall look of the model with low effort brush work. This fist pattern requires some time to do right. All the seams and looping elements are tricky to figure out. The good news is I can reuse this pattern from now on. And I do. And I will do so again. And you cannot stop me. I remake the head to make it look more weird, more rigid, adding implications of indentations and relief. It takes several tries to pick the correct projection that works best for this rounded shape. Put some glowing peppers into his dark, mysterious and non-existent mug. Who the pilgrim is does not matter as much as what he is. Fabrics are simple. I keep track of where it's gonna crumple around the groin and knees. I put highlights in the front, shadows in the creases and high up where the trousers hide beneath the skirt. Belts and buckles and other details won't have their own geometry. They are all painted straight into the texture. Some of these painted on details are the dividers and clasps for the coat and the skirt, which close along the front seam. It is reminiscent of military uniforms from the Napoleonic Wars. make sure they are stretched just the right amount. One of the places I do add geometry for is this buckle on the ammo supply bag. There wasn't any other way to make it look good. Now comes the time to decide what to do with the skirt. My options to dealing with the skirt are 1. Let Unity cloth handle it. 2. Animate it with bones. 3. Find some kind of a springy bone solution in the asset store. Similar questions concern feathers too. I want them to sway during movement, maybe even be affected by some kind of a wind system. But if I can animate this skirt by hand, doing so with feathers is not an option. Unity cloth is... well, look at it, it's shit. It's a shit. I can't do anything with it. Maybe I'm missing something. It would save me a lot of headache if it worked, like in Diablo 3 for example. But this isn't it, I don't know. If it gets stuck during movement, I don't see how to unstuck it. Some kind of a springy bone system would fit better. Unity doesn't have something like that by default, but there are assets in the store. The problem with paid assets is, well, you have to pay for them. What did you think? I'm too early in my development cycle to even consider getting a paid asset. First of all, my budget is peanuts. Secondly, I can't know for sure if any of them will do the job, and I'd rather not do a complicated thing in my game if, as a result, I will not know how some part of my project works. For now, I will animate this skirt by hand with my usual 4-bone system. Except that it's not a 4-bone system, it's a 6-bone system. I added 2 side bones to have a more precise control over my skirt deformations. And the feathers? The feathers are a problem for the future me. The ammo bag gets its own bone as well. Although, I must admit, at some point I should figure out a way to make bones affected by physics. But not now. This time I add weapon bones to the armature, a common practice. I adjust the gun's root position by parenting it to the said bone. As I do this, I get second thoughts about my gun design. Redrawing it now doesn't really work out. Something was wrong with my brain box at the time, I just don't know what. I say, if it doesn't come to you, let it go. Try again later. Shove everything into cascadeur, rig it, see how it behaves. All good? No? Get back to the model in Blender and adjust everything that doesn't look right. Jump back and forth between the two until there are no more issues to correct. And that's just life. Since the model is more or less done, it's time to animate it. The first animation to do is idle animation. It begins with the pose. It is the simplest one, you just bob the character up and down. Now, onto the bread and butter of character animations, running. My guy will always be pointing the gun forward. Instead of playing around with overlaying animations, I will just model his runs with the gun pointing forward at all times. He has to run in 8 directions and blend between them on the fly. For each of those he must have his arm, head and probably the entire shoulder girdle facing forward. Now, because of how animation blending works in Unity, and based on prior experiences, I've stumbled into a sort of a system for animating omni-directional movement. I need 2 sets of running animations, forward and backward. You can either run forward in an arc of 180 or run backwards in an arc of 180. When switching between them, the character must perform a 180 pelvis rotation, which will look jarring in places, but, well, there are ways to minimize the damage. To achieve this, I need 6 running animations in total: forward, left and right for forward runs, backwards, left and right for backward runs. Then, when I tie them all in the animator, I will switch between the 2 sets based on the run and look directions. Good source of reference for this are third-person games with smooth animation transitions, like Tomb Raider right here. You see how she switches between forward and backward movement. Max Payne games aren't a bad fit either. They are so old they would not rely on any advanced techniques. I also presume that Payne's code hides away any nasty mesh contortions, if there are any. Marvel Rivals is another valid source. It has several gun-oriented characters. You can really see these animations blending. For some characters it works better than for others. I can't say when was the last time I legit had to animate a humanoid, but it was apparently long enough so that I forgot a bunch. Good thing I can take a look at my past work. Cascadeur allows you to get a decent enough motion with very few keyframes. So again, broad strokes first, details later. To my own dismay, I break that rule again and jump into detailing too early. Shit. It all falls apart as a result. I dump whatever progress I had with this and start animations anew. Looks better, but not when the guy is suspended in air. With some movement up and down, it starts to look usable, finally. Get the animation back into Blender. Seeing it applied to the texture model really seals the deal. It's bouncy, janky, but good. It's good. The scarf clips into the head though. Some clipping is fine, but not like this. This will be entirely visible from the camera perspective. Side running animations are the tricky ones, especially those for the backward set. On one hand, I want the shoulder girdle to face forward entirely. On the other hand, I want the pelvis to be rotated at 90 degrees. I don't know if you know, but that's not exactly a comfortable running position. Running and gunning directly to the side isn't a very natural thing to do in general. In order for it to work, I have to gradually turn the spine bones to spread the mesh deformation across the whole body. I'm trying to retain as much of the default movement I can, but it falls apart everywhere. And I have to do all of this twice. Have you ever heard the 80-20 rule in drawing? It states that 80% of the painting takes 20% of the time, and the last 20% take 80% of the time. It is meant to point out that, more often than not, you're better off taking your work to 80% and moving on, because the last 20% aren't worth additional time investment. Well, in animations, those last 20% can make a hell of a difference, I tell you what. I take these animations back to Blender for processing, export them into Unity, and everything seems fine, except is the character facing backwards? Well, it's not that big of an issue. Let me just go back and... Oh my lord, Jesus, have mercy! What is that? What the fuck is that? Alright, it's alright, I can fix this some other way. Are we having some positioning issues here? Why is he all the way up there? I mean, I can bring him down by hand, but... what is the cause of this nonsense? Well, there are, of course, axis conversions between softwares, like Blender, Cascadeur and Unity. I could tell you a story about how Bill Gates single-handedly fucked every 3D artist from both past and future, but maybe another time. Oh my, look at that! We have a rogue vertex that doesn't want to follow his bone mummy. Well, we can't have that, can we? Let's go back and do the shooting animation. Punchy and sharp. Export everything into Unity and... Why is he leaning forward? He isn't leaning forward in any of the running animations. Why here? What is this shit? Is he tired? Is he drunk? Well, guess what? It's this little fucking slider. I guess it eats away imported keyframes and remakes animation curves in some asinine way. No thank you. Now everything is finally fine. Except in the scene view, the man's lying on his face. He is drunk. Don't worry folks, this is what you can thank Billy Gates for, and I know just the cure. Some good old axis conversion therapy will do the trick. Now one final checkup to see if everything works fine, and then I can move on. I've been doing this crap for so long, Unity version 6000 came out. Can you imagine? I skipped 4000 versions of it. Wild. Finally I can get to programming. Getting Unity's input action system up for controls is usually the first step. The second is reusing part of the code from my older prototypes. What? Don't boo me, it's my code. Look at the bastard. He moves around. They grow up so fast. I'm using Cinemachine for all my camera-related needs. It is a bit of an overkill, but faster than writing camera logic from scratch. Next, I keep track of mouse positions and rotate the character towards the cursor accordingly. Onto the animation controller. Setting up 2D directional animation blends with everything I've prepared up to this point. Need to be careful with all of the transition parameters. There's a lot of stuff to turn off every time. Back when I came up with my Omni-Directional movement system, I have basically trial and errored my way into it. This is part of the reason why I make these damned videos, to remember what I did right and what I did wrong. You see, I would be fine with jerky transitions between animations. It would be fine for a retro game, but something irks me about it. I have to try to smooth it all out. Oh yeah, shouldn't he turn towards the cursor? Why doesn't he? No, the other way. The other way. Jesus. There we go. Finally. Okay, why does it look like crap? Oh, the relative vector calculations are wrong. One moment. Yep, there we go. Well, this is the crux of the problem. When we go past the 90-degree point at either side, this sharp turn happens. It doesn't look good. But what's even worse is this. Do you see it? There are certain situations where the pelvis begins turning from the wrong starting position. This is the problem I thought I remembered how to avoid. Maybe you can't avoid it without additional programming. I try one of my other solutions, blending gradually between north and south blend trees. And now there is this problem. Shitty animation blend at the border values. Damn it. Okay, screw it. I'll deal with that later. How about shooting animation? How do I overlay it on top of all other animations? Not like this, I tell you that much. Unity animation system allows masking and overlaying and blending animation layers, which should work fine, but it doesn't. Let's take a look at Max Payne again. This is what I need. He runs around, all cool and dandy, and then when he shoots, his arm jogs a little bit. It is a motion that is added on top of any animation his body does. This motion is small and sharp. Maybe that's my problem. I'm sending this motion all the way down to the hip bones. There is no way it will work as intended. Guess I'll have to redo this one too. At this point I started having second thoughts about the overall design. I look at the character as a whole and I do like the individual parts, the concept, the textures, the movement. But when they all combine inside the engine, I cannot shake the feeling of encroaching dismay. It doesn't work. It does not click together. The sum of the parts is not greater. Why did I have the change of heart? The answer lies in the chronology of my development. I started working on the first iteration by January the 7th. On the 14th I've abandoned it and jumped into the second iteration. It was mostly done by the 28th, and that was the moment I got diverted to other endeavors. Back then I got doubts about the Pilgrim already, so I decided to let my work sit for a bit. Let my mind process my thoughts in the background, and return later with a fresh perspective. I did a quick programming-heavy template for a Sudoku solver. Maybe I'll make a video about it later. Then I've spent 2 weeks making the Bone Blaster game, video for which you can find on my channel. Between March 10th and 24th I worked on and off on the first potential enemy, a mangy dog. It had a mixed success. Don't ask me what happened during this stretch of time. Never ask me that. I got back to the main character design on March 25th. I have completely detached myself from it, so I could honestly admit to myself, I didn't like it. So back to the bin again. And thus I cracked my knuckles and got ready to do it all over one more time. Starting the third iteration, the one I dubbed the Highwayman. Third time's the charm, isn't it? He's hoping that it will all be worth the struggling, the doubting, the reworking. Tune in next time for the third and final report on the main character. How long do you think it took to draw the ornaments? Don't answer that.